The rip sounded louder than the music, sharper than the clatter of plates, and for a split second it felt as if the whole bar inhaled at once. In the bright wash of late afternoon sun pouring through the front windows, a biker's arm was frozen midair, a torn strip of fabric fluttered down like a wounded flag, and the waitress stood rooted to the floor with her breath trapped in her chest. Whatever was revealed in that moment did not invite laughter or cheers or the ugly thrill the crowd expected. It brought silence so heavy it pressed against every rib in the room, and something unseen yet unmistakable passed through the bar, turning noise into stillness and cruelty into shame. If you believe that kindness can find its way into even the darkest corners and that people deserve second chances, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel Only Kindness, because stories like this remind us why compassion still matters. The bar was called Daybreak Junction, an old roadside place that leaned into the sun as if it needed the warmth to keep standing. Outside, dust drifted lazily across the parking lot where motorcycles gleamed beside dented sedans, and inside the air smelled of citrus cleaner, coffee, and the sweet burn of fried onions. It was still daylight, the hour when the lunch crowd thinned and the evening regulars had not yet arrived, and that meant the waitresses did double duty, wiping counters, refilling napkins, and moving with practiced efficiency between tables. Mara Elkins had learned to make herself small in rooms like this, to keep her shoulders angled and her eyes steady, to read the mood of strangers the way some people read weather. She wore a faded blue shirt with the cafe's stitched logo over her heart, the fabric soft from too many washes, and she moved as if she carried more weight than a tray of glasses. Every step held the memory of bills folded too thin, of a mother's medicine set on a shelf at home, of a life paused not by choice but by necessity. Mara had started at Daybreak Junction 6 months earlier after the textile mill on the edge of town shut its doors. She had been one of the last to leave, locking the metal gate with hands that shook, promising herself it was temporary. The cafe paid hourly and tips, enough to keep the lights on and the fridge humming, and she told herself that was victory enough. She learned names quickly, smiled even when she did not feel it, and practiced a careful neutrality that let her pass through rough afternoons without becoming a target. Most days it worked, some days it did not. There were customers who thought a waitress was a thing to be tested, poked, and pulled, a canvas for their boredom. Mara had learned to swallow the burn, to keep her voice even, to leave the table and let the moment pass. It was not dignity she felt in those moments, but survival. The bikers came in just after 2, the bell over the door chiming once before the sound was swallowed by the hum of the place. There were 4 of them, leather jackets creaking as they moved, boots scuffing the floor, tattoos peeking from sleeves like secrets that wanted telling. They took a booth near the window where the sun slanted across the table, turning dust motes into sparks. The biggest of them sat with his back to the wall, shoulders wide enough to block the light, hair pulled back tight, a scar tracing a pale line along his jaw. His name was Cole Mercer, though few people in that room knew it, and fewer still knew the reasons he carried his silence the way others carried weapons. He watched the room with an expression that did not ask for approval and did not offer comfort, the kind of presence that made people glance and then look away. Mara approached the table with menus and water, her posture careful, her smile professional. She had served bikers before, learned that leather and steel did not automatically mean danger, learned too that assumptions could cut both ways. She set the glasses down, recited the specials, and took the orders without lingering. It was the man across from Cole who began to push, a smirk curling his mouth, his gaze wandering with a familiarity that felt like fingers. Mara felt the old tightening in her chest, the instinct to deflect, to hurry. She moved to turn away when the hand reached out, not for her arm or her wrist, but for the front of her shirt. The fabric caught, the seam gave, and the sound tore through the room. In the instant that followed, time slowed into a cruel clarity. The tear exposed not skin meant for spectacle, not anything that belonged to the realm of leering fantasy, but something else entirely. Beneath the ripped cloth, strapped securely across her torso, was a medical brace, and beneath that, peeking above the edge, the faded ink of an old surgical scar that ran like a quiet road across her collarbone. The brace was there for a reason, a reminder of a car accident that had stolen months of her life and left her with pain that flared without warning. It was not a secret she had chosen to share, not a vulnerability she had offered to the room, and yet there it was, undeniable and human. The laughter that had been rising died mid-breath. A fork clinked against a plate and sounded obscene in the hush. Mara felt heat flood her face, not the heat of desire but the sting of exposure. She wrapped her arms around herself, fingers digging into her sides, and for a heartbeat she considered running. She imagined the door, the sun outside, the relief of escape, but her legs would not move. Shame and anger tangled inside her, and beneath them all a familiar exhaustion pressed down. She had survived worse than this, she told herself, but survival did not mean it did not hurt. Around her, the room waited, unsure of what to do with the truth that had just landed between ketchup bottles and salt shakers. Cole was on his feet before anyone else found their voice. He did not shout. He did not need to. The movement alone shifted the air. He placed himself between Mara and the man who had reached for her, his back a wall, his presence final. The biker who had torn the shirt stammered something that did not qualify as an apology, a half-formed joke that fell flat. Cole's eyes did not leave his face. There was a history in that gaze, a weight that came from years of learning when to hold back and when to step in. Without touching the man again, Cole made it clear that there would be consequences if the line was crossed 1 inch further. The room understood, and so did the offender, who shrank back into his seat as if the bench itself could swallow him. The owner of Daybreak Junction emerged from the kitchen, hands still dusted with flour, eyes sharp. She took in the scene, the torn shirt, the brace, the hush, and acted with the decisiveness of someone who had seen enough to know hesitation only deepened harm. She draped a clean apron around Mara's shoulders, her touch firm and kind, and told her to take a break, no argument. She turned to the table and informed the man who had reached that his meal was over and his presence no longer welcome. There was no debate. The bell over the door chimed again as he left, the sound this time carrying a note of finality. Mara sat in the back room with a mug of water shaking in her hands, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. She focused on her breathing, on the cool ceramic against her palms, on the fact that she was still here. The brace pressed against her ribs, a reminder of resilience she did not always feel. She had not expected anyone to step in, not really. She had learned that rooms often chose comfort over confrontation. Yet something had shifted today. She replayed the moment of silence, the way the bar had held its breath not in anticipation of spectacle but in recognition of a boundary crossed too far. Cole lingered by the counter, his companions quiet, their bravado stripped away. He felt the familiar churn of regret and resolve that followed moments like this. He had grown up learning that strength meant taking without asking, that respect was a currency earned through fear. Years and miles had taught him otherwise, had carved lessons into him as deeply as the scar on his jaw. He remembered his sister, the way the world had taken pieces from her until there was nothing left to give, and the promise he had made too late. Standing there now, he felt the echo of that promise press against his ribs. He did not know Mara's story, did not need to, only knew that harm had been done and that harm demanded response. When Mara returned to the floor, the apron hiding the tear, she moved with a steadiness that surprised her. The room had returned to a low murmur, but something was different in the way eyes met hers and then looked away with respect rather than appraisal. Cole caught her gaze once, a brief acknowledgement that did not ask for gratitude. It was enough. He paid the bill in full, left a tip that felt like an apology on behalf of a world that too often asked women to absorb pain quietly, and guided his group toward the door. Before leaving, he spoke to the owner, his voice low, offering to pay for the shirt, to make amends where he could. She nodded, understanding that repair came in many forms. The rest of the shift unfolded with an unusual gentleness. Regulars asked if Mara was okay, not prying, simply present. The sun dipped lower, turning the windows gold, and she found herself breathing more easily. The incident did not vanish, it settled into her like a bruise, tender but survivable. She thought of the mill, of the locked gate, of all the moments she had endured because endurance was the only option. She realized that day had given her something else as well, a reminder that community could choose to protect, that silence could be broken in the right direction. As evening approached, the bell chimed again and Cole returned alone, jacket slung over his arm. He placed a neatly folded envelope on the counter addressed to the owner, explaining that it was for the staff fund, no strings attached. He did not look for Mara, did not ask to be seen as anything more than a man doing what should have been done in the first place. Before leaving, he paused by the doorway and took in the room once more, committing the memory to the quiet ledger he kept of moments that mattered. Outside, the daylight lingered, refusing to surrender too quickly. Mara finished her shift and stepped into the warm afternoon, the sky wide and forgiving. She walked home with a lighter step, the brace still there, the bills still waiting, but something inside her had shifted. She thought of the tear not as a moment of humiliation but as a rupture that let truth spill into a place that needed it. She thought of the biker who had stood without grandstanding, of the owner who had acted without hesitation, of a room that had chosen better. These were small victories, easily overlooked, but they stitched together into something strong. Days later, a package arrived at the cafe addressed to Mara. Inside was a new shirt, the same faded blue, the logo stitched with care, and a note written in careful handwriting that spoke of respect and the importance of choosing decency when it mattered. There was no signature, no demand for acknowledgement. Mara pressed the fabric between her fingers, feeling the promise in its weight. She wore it on her next shift, standing a little taller, the brace hidden but no longer a source of shame. She found herself speaking up when a line was crossed, supported by a workplace that had proven its backbone. The story did not end with applause or transformation overnight. Life rarely offers such neat conclusions. The bills came, the shifts continued, and the road ahead remained uneven. But something enduring had been set in motion, a reminder that harm could be confronted, that kindness could be loud when it needed to be, that second chances were not just for those who asked for them but for those willing to change. Mara carried that lesson with her, letting it inform the way she moved through the world, the way she met eyes and held her ground. If this story reached you, if it made your chest tighten or your eyes burn, take a moment to let that feeling move outward. Like the video, share it with someone who might need a reminder that decency still exists, and leave a comment telling us what moment stayed with you the most. Before this story ends, I have one special request for you. Please comment the word kindness below so we can see how many hearts were touched today. And if you felt even a flicker of hope reading this, engage with the video now, because every like, every share, every subscription to Only Kindness helps stories like this find the people who need them most.